Thank you, thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Josh, for always an illuminating presentation. And I love when I'm on a panel with Josh, because if Josh starts, he lays out the playing field in really a lucid, very, very attainable and accessible way. So really, thank you. So I would actually say, I got a bunch of notes, but I want to actually see if I can get them down to about 10 different concepts. We have an understanding issue, an alignment issue, a scale and a sustaining issue. Those are the issues that we have. Just like Josh talked about 3 or 6 things, which if you were our school teacher, and as Josh was talking, I started thinking about my first year as a school teacher, and frankly, thank God I had Leo Casey, who became essentially, I had an urban residency in Leo Casey's class that really helped teach me how to teach. And so whereas Josh had a principal who was incredibly helpful, I had another teacher. I'm sure we violated every single rule in our contract, but we didn't actually even think about it in that way. He really helped me, and my colleagues really helped me. But you think about, if you go back to thinking about actually being a school teacher, you're constantly thinking, what do your kids need to know and be able to do? And you're also constantly thinking, what do I know and what do I need to be able to do? And it is both about the content and about the other skills that you need to have separate and apart from content. You may know, I'll use my content area, you may know the Bill of Rights backwards and forwards. You may know the case law that makes it real backwards and forwards. But if you can't communicate or engage, and I think that in terms of your poll this time, that stat about engagement was probably, in my view, was what said to me, wow, parents get this more than policymakers. When parents were saying engagement of students is a more important aspect of accountability than anything else. They got the connection. If you don't know how to engage or make that connection, then I don't care what content you have, you are not going to be a successful teacher. So if you think about it, starting from what do we need to know and be able to do to make sure that kids know and be able to do whatever they need to know and be able to do, if you start with that concept, then you can actually get to the 4 or 5 different issues that Josh talked about at the end. So from a teachers union standpoint, we have a little ditty: tools, time, and trust, and how do you attract, support, and retain. And I should also quickly say, the great thing about teachers is that most of us go into this profession because we want to make a difference in the lives of kids. And that sense of motivation and spirit and commitment, you cannot teach somebody how to do that. You either have that or you don't have that. But that is a huge, important engagement piece if teachers are actually allowed to show that to children. That's number 1. But there are so many other things that can be taught that should be built upon. And let me quickly say that with saying that we need to have professional development, with saying that we need to have the time, tools, and trust, at the end of the day, and I think this gets to Josh's point too, frankly, I actually expected that factor to be higher about the anti-tenure factor, or the opposition to tenure. Because tenure has become that also the new bugaboo. If we could just get rid of tenure. If someone can teach, and they've been given the opportunity to learn if there's been a problem, then they shouldn't be there. And we, as a teachers' union, have to do the same kind of work collaboratively with management to do that about our profession. I used to call it policing our profession. I think it's more than that. It's a matter of we need to make sure that we help people learn how to teach. It's pretty complex, but if they can't, or if something has happened and they can't, and they've been treated fairly, then we need to find ways for them to exit the profession. And then there's not going to be a question about tenure anymore. We have processes, because at the end of the day, tenure becomes an incredibly vital right if you're a school teacher trying to fight to make sure your special needs kids get the services and the resources they need. Tenure becomes something that's really important as a way of really protecting your voice on a very individual basis. And so we need to find ways of both keeping due process and keeping the concept of tenure, but making sure it is not used as a substitute for lifetime employment. There is lifetime employment for college professors who have tenure, and there's lifetime employment for Supreme Court justices. There's never been that for school teachers. There is a way of trying to create fairness, and that's what tenure is supposed to be. So now that I've taken on the toughest issue, the 3 points that I would make very quickly is this. Restoring the teaching profession to a profession of status and stature. I love this ditty that we found, this little stat that we found that says that the top 25 hedge fund managers earn more than all the kindergarten teachers in the U.S. combined, and they pay a lower percentage of taxes. That, in one sentence, gives you a sense of who has status and stature in the country and who doesn't. And that just has to change. And frankly, people are pretty smart. And this is part of what we've seen in the last few years, is with all the teacher bashing and all the sense of both hands are going to be tied behind your back and you're not really going to be able to have any latitude to do what you need to do, and you're also not going to get paid well, and you're going to be, the subject of a movie that says that you're horrible people. It's no wonder that there are fewer and fewer people going into teacher prep institutions from California to New York. And that has to change. And that's where time, tools, and trust come in. It has to change both in terms of pay and in terms of stature and in terms of latitude. That's number one. Number two, obviously, teachers need to be held to rigorous standards, and they need to have the training and the support. This is where my first point about alignment issues, scale and sustainability issues, understanding issues come into play. There are places that do this extraordinarily well. Most places do not. We need to take like a place like Josh was talking about, the school that he started in. We need to take situations like the urban residency programs that we're starting to see throughout the country. We need to take places like Meriden, Connecticut, that has done professional development in an extraordinarily good way. And not just walk around and say, do this, replicate this. It's not replicating this. It's taking the strategies that are embedded in these places that do well and then say, how can we replicate the strategies and customize them to the place that you are in? And that's what takes and needs a good principal, because a good principal and a good collaborative relationship will be able to do that. If you have a welcoming, safe, collaborative school and you have a good strategy that you find somewhere else, you're going to figure out how to do that if you have the resources, or if you beg, borrow, and steal to get the resources. So the issues about what works, both in terms of pre-service, hiring, induction on board, PD, and collaboration, as well as with teacher leadership, if you have a collaborative environment and you have people who are willing to actually use the resources in these ways, we have to just have the strategies that we can practice and practice and practice. And that also gets back to the issue of tenure and risk. Because if you're going to be shamed and blamed, or if everything is going to be so highly consequential that one bad move you're gone, then nobody's going to take the risk to do these kinds of things. So, last point that I want to make is that at the end of the day, teacher evaluation has to be thought of not as a sorting mechanism, but as a real improvement mechanism. Every school knows who's doing a really, really good job and who's doing a not so good job. It's harder in terms of what that middle looks like, but every school knows that. The real question becomes, how can we use a teacher development and evaluation process to actually do the things? I would use different words than Josh used. I think that basically our teaching force in the United States of America are regular folks doing extraordinary work. Be careful about the words that we use. Basically, though, how do we help people actually do a whole different job today than when they were first hired? And I would actually even argue that somebody who's hired today, in 3 or 4 years from now, if they stay, and we have more of an attrition problem than we have a recruitment problem, how do we help make sure that they have the skills and knowledge to do what they need to do to help kids? And so the last thing I'll say is, I started by saying we have alignment issues, we have scale and sustainability issues, we have understanding issues, particularly about how complex this is. You close your eyes and think, how do we help teachers teach kids how they are prepared, not just for college or for career, but for life? How they have the confidence and competence to be problem solvers, to understand relationships, to be involved and engaged in teams, in teamwork, to have the resilience that they need, as well as all the content that we used to teach. We need to take a step back, find the things that work, figure out the strategies underlying them, and give people a lot of time to practice, practice, practice. If we do that, start aligning things in a better way, and start focusing on how we sustain what works and systematize it, we'd be better off than one more time having, as Josh said, that one thing that if you change, or that one shaking up of people. Let's treat it and treat children like the wonderful, complex individuals they are, and schools like the wonderful, complex organisms they are. Find the strategies that work, systematize them, let people learn how to use them.